Greetings, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to a new season of the Virtual Dalcroze Meetup. We are in our fifth year. This is Meetup number 86, which is crazy that we've had so many. And I'm just thrilled to welcome everybody to our new season. A happy beginning of the new school year to most people. And today we get to uh, uh, continue a long series we've started called Lessons from Our Teachers. And the famous teacher of days past is Elizabeth van der Spar of England. And we have a number of her students with us today who can talk about it. But before we get into all of that, I want to introduce Emma Shubin, my dear colleague. Emma, I feel like my connection must be really bad. Am I okay?
It's a little choppy, so I'll hop in and say we're just so happy to have everybody here. We tend to start in the same way each time. We do a little breakout room. We give you just enough time to wish you had a little bit more time to say who you are, who you teach, where you're from. And so I think Stephen is maybe setting up our breakout rooms if he hasn't already, but we're gonna hop up and do that first, and then we'll come back and have some presentations, which we're really excited to hear from everybody about. So I think, Stephen, if we are ready, Veronica's also just about rolling in at this moment. We had some
Great.
friends coming in
So
from teaching.
in
So
the breakout room, our tradition is just that you tell everybody your name, where you're located, and who do you teach. Your name, where are you located, and who do you teach? And we'll be back in 2 minutes. Ready, set, go. looks like we maybe have everybody back.
One person in our group,
Wait, Veronica, say
uh,
that again.
one person in our group was having some sound issues. She
Yeah,
said,
that
"Oh,
I'm struggling a little bit with the connection, it looks like. So,
mm,
I don't know, we're just gonna have to see if this works. Veronica, you look like you're coming in clear as can be to me.
okay."
I'm waiting for more faces to appear on the screen. I got like I'm gonna pause on. I'd like to also introduce our co-founder and co-host Veronica Boleski. Veronica made her way in during the breakouts. And Veronica, do you want to hit us with some of the late breaking announcements?
Yeah, welcome to a new bunch of events. In September, October, and November, we have three master classes and two short courses. And if you view the agenda, you can see a quick summary. So first, if you are ever wondering when is the next VDM event, you have two options. One is to print out this Google Doc, and it's a public printable schedule. The other one is the Google Calendar, and if you go to that part of our website and hit subscribe, you will get the VDM events added to your calendar in your own time zone. So then you don't have to worry like, am I in this time zone? What time is it? And it will just convert it for you. And then maybe Stephen or Emma, you guys can just talk a little bit about Dawn's and Adriana's events, which are coming up soon. And then Cheng Feng Lin and Selma Odom and Kay Barker are a little bit later in the fall.
Well, we are thrilled to have Dawn back for her short courses. This is, I think, her third iteration of Virtual Dance with Dawn. She's really excited to move with everybody, and it's guaranteed to be a wonderful experience as always. But her extensive work in the Laban system and her own work in our Dalcroze field, and she's a wonderful musician. Just so many lovely things that she brings to us. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And then Adriana's masterclass was rescheduled from the spring, and we're very excited to welcome her. And so if you haven't had a chance to pass this information on to everybody you've ever met, please do so. We never want anyone to feel like they can't join us. And so Integral Steps is always happy to help support the scholarship side of things. And we have had so many generous donations from our community here. And so we just really want to welcome new people to these rooms. And I was very surprised at ICDS, the International Conference, to find out that not everybody knows that these meetups happen and are free. So please keep letting your people know. And we hope to keep welcoming you guys back here. It's great to see everyone.
Adriana Alsch, if you've not worked with her, is a dynamic and long-standing American Dalcrozian who's taught at the university level for many years. She has a special sort of angle of things that she often gets to, which is the overlaps between architectures and musicianship. And I feel sure some of that's going to work its way into her masterclass. And so if you haven't done that work with Adriana, I think you would find it really interesting how like the actual built buildings and she shows lots of sort of visual images and then uses those as inspiration for different elements of musicianship. And so I think it'll be really exciting and highly practical for many people who are in classroom settings. So we encourage you to join us.
Yep. And I think in the next meetup in about 2 or 3 weeks, Adriana is coming to give us a little taste of that too. So you can meet her at the meetup. And then her class is a few days after that. I wanted to play Dawn's short course intro video because Dawn is talking a little bit more about what she'll be doing.
Greetings to everyone in the Dalcroze virtual Dalcroze meetup community. I'm excited to be teaching a virtual dance with Dawn again this fall, September 17th through October 22nd. And we will have an hour on Wednesday mornings here at the East Coast and other times throughout the land. We'll be warming up our bodies. We'll be looking at movement vocabulary and performing some fun sequences, movement sequences to get us in our bodies and in our expressive self. See you then. Greetings to everyone.
So Dawn has been an absolute, I mean, she's a dear friend of all of ours, and I know most of the people on the call know her and have worked with her in the past. But if you've not worked with her and are looking for ways to increase just your own expressive movement vocabulary, also think of ways that you could share big body gesture with other groups of any age. Dawn has extensive background and is one of the most beloved teachers here in the States. And I think that's plenty. We have a huge, we got a big crowd today, both observing but also presenting. And so we want to keep things moving today. We have a regular series, which maybe you've been following, called Lessons from Our Teachers. The VDM has for a couple years now tried to reserve a couple meetups to talk about famous teachers of the last generation. And we've tried a couple times to get the stars to align to be able to talk about this very famous teacher, Elizabeth van der Spar. And I'm just thrilled that we're all together today with some of her students who can just tell us a little bit about it. Veronica, can you remind us of our time constraints, and then we'll hand it over?
Sure. So Ava, we'll start with you. And after Ava, we'll go directly to Karin. After Karin, we'll go directly to Selma. And then after Selma, we'll go directly to Ruth. I will be your timekeeper. I know it is so difficult to talk about a beloved teacher and their impact on you in a brief amount of time. Let's see if we can keep our presentations to 5 or 6 minutes. And if you desperately need to go over, I will be flexible. And that will give us some time to also share more in response to what people who were listening have to share, or maybe they have questions, and we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more. So I will try to give you a 1-minute warning. And again, my apologies. This is not my favorite job. I know that these teachers mean so much to all of us. All right, Ava, we'll begin with you.
Ava.
Ava,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for
Okay.
correcting me.
So in 1974, believe it or not, 50 years ago, I started my license program in Geneva. And I was there until 76. And during my second year, I met Ruth Alperson, Louise Mathieu, and Sandra Nash, who were doing their diploma there. And especially Sandra and Ruth told me a lot about the London School and the program they had there. I was very, very interested in what they were describing, because it sounded so different from what I was doing in Geneva, that I decided to move there. So after I talked to the director of the institute, who was at the time Dominique Porte, I moved to London. And in London, the first very big change was the venue, because we were at that time, the Dalcroze School was at the Royhampton College of Higher Education, a beautiful building surrounded by a magnificent park around. But the classes were held not only there, but also in other places. Like when we had Kodai, we used to move to Cecilia's place, Cecilia Vaida's place, and we went to Ruth Stewart. We went to her home to have the Dalcroze subject. Elizabeth was holding her classes at the Royhampton College. Well, at that time, I must say that I wasn't used to take notes, so I can't really recall a specific lesson that she was giving. But what I remember, first of all, it was her as a person. The first thing that the image of that I still have of her is her piercing eyes. She used to look at you with these blue eyes, and she would sort of X-rayed you, and and like you felt. I mean, I felt as if she was really knowing me, coming into me to know parts of myself that were not necessarily related to being a rhythmician. The second thing that I remember is that her classes were so different from what I did in Geneva. In Geneva, we had one thing after another, and classes were very directive. You know, you did this and this and this and this. With her, she was presenting the material, she made us work, and after a while, she would let us free and say, now you explore. Give you time to explore and produce something. And I was completely lost. I wasn't at all used to that approach. But at the end, it took me quite a while to understand what was her point. She wanted really us to be able to find a sort of independence and our own way to discover things. Another thing was that also the use of music in Geneva, we were restrained in the sense that, you know, already doing some Bartók was something quite innovative. So with her, we had an approach also to contemporary music, and in fact, I was really very pleased that she would accept. For my license, I did my plastique on Ligeti second string quartet. So it was quite something quite innovative in a way for those times. And she was extremely encouraging. Also because I used things like the big masque larvaire, which were the masks of the carnival in Basel, Switzerland, you know, the big white mask that were abstract. So she was extremely encouraging. And also, I also remember when once she had to write a recommendation letter for me, I was really very, how can I say, very surprised, because she would not talk only about, you know, my professional approach, but she would talk also about me as a person, which was I find very, very special, very unusual for a teacher, compared to Geneva, where, you know, they would say this and this and this in rhythmics, in solfège, in improv. She would.
Ava, 1 minute, please.
Yes, she would sort of also try to give to look at you in a way that was not only, that was also personal, but without being invasive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful reflection. We are moving on to Karin, please.
And Karin, I have your pictures in your document. If you just ask, I'll bring them up anytime you want.
Put the photographs of Elizabeth so people who didn't know her can see what she looks like. That's her. Okay, thank you. So, yes, this was when we had a memorial for her. So it gives you some idea of what she looked like. Elizabeth, I think the main thing about her really was who she was. It's not because she modeled something that was quite different from what you mainly saw and see in any teachers, really, I suppose. She and to understand how she was, you have to know a little bit about her background. So she had a very disrupted education. She went to 14 different schools because her parents, as part of the British Empire, were off in India and other places. So she never really had a home or a home life. And then she told me that, in fact, she was brought up by the army. And she got all her values from the army. And I looked up the British Army values, which are 6, and they are courage, discipline, respect for others, integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment. And I have to say, she did all those things. She was all those things. She wasn't a guru who drew people to herself. In fact, quite the reverse. I don't think we would ever refer to her as a beloved teacher. That wasn't her attitude towards us. It was one of quite a different and more distant. And she wasn't her main thing was public service. She had a duty and we had a duty. So we were expected to fulfill that duty towards our students, just as she did towards us. And it was she was pragmatic and very practical. And the other thing I think that was very interesting about her is that owing to her values and being brought up by the army, she was not a guru. She's one of the very few teachers with a sort of substantial but kind of invisible reputation who ended up training a lot of diplomates at the time, including us, who had an entirely collaborative approach. It wasn't about her, it was the team. So she created a quite remarkable team of people, including Ruth Stewart, and I put a whole list of them, but I'll just say some of them brief. We had about 9 teachers. It wasn't just Elizabeth. We had Ruth Stewart, who had studied with Yvonne Loriot, and she was a specialist in contemporary music, especially Messiaen. And she was a sort of poet philosopher, really. And Patsy James, who did a lot about teaching children. We had a supervisor for teaching practice, was Teane. Laura Campbell was on the sort of improvising for rhythmics classes side. Anne Driver, we had some sessions with. Priscilla Barclay, who was a music therapist. And we all had to take dance classes with Simone Michel, who was Laban and Lieder specialist. And we all did historical dance with Belinda Quirey. So she put together from the people she could access and what was available on the evening class network of the Inner London Education Authority. She found the people she thought we needed. She knew what she was good at, and she knew that other people were good at other things that she wasn't her particular strength, and she brought them in, even if she didn't particularly get on with them. They weren't her friends or close to her in any way. But the whole idea was this was what we, the students, needed, and that was her entire focus, actually. And before I started the license, when I was doing my certificate, she arranged for us to go and have lessons with Judith West on how to improvise for contemporary dance. And we then went into London Contemporary Dance School and in pairs and played for the classes.
Karen, 1 minute, please.
So she gave us a very, very rich experience. I think she's a sort of invisible person, really, and it's a bit about time that she appeared more in the public. Well, if I've only got 1 minute, I won't say any more. But this is the main thing, really. She was a model, and she certainly, when she decided to retire, when she was only just over 60, she said, "You've got to go to Geneva and get a diploma, and you've got to get it in 1 year, or else you have to pay back all the money," which wasn't a lot of money. I had to work while I was there, I have to say. But I did manage to get it anyway. And then she said, "Now it's your turn. My husband is ill. I owe him my time. It's your job now to run the training program." No handover, no instruction, nothing. She was dyslexic as well. She sometimes wasn't very good at explaining things. But if you said, "Is it because X, Y, Z?" she would recognize what you said and say, "Yes." But she herself, she wasn't a naturally verbal person. She was an amazing figure. She could teach a class of children between 14 and 16. I saw her do it. Now that she'd never met before, and she had to give a demonstration class with all these, and she did. She was extraordinary. Very practical person and very generous. So some people were not very comfortable with her because of the army side of things. She was quite demanding, and this is what we do, you know, in a way, as being very free and creative as well. And but behind that, she was extremely generous, producing money for students who didn't have anything, asking some of us if we could donate for this student that didn't have any money. And because I had problems at home one year, she invited me to Christmas at their place because it was difficult for me to go home. So a person to discover in spite of her relative invisibility, let's say.
Thank you so much, Karen. Selma?
So my perspective is very different because I am not Dalcroze teacher and didn't study with her in that way, but I did learn a great deal from Elizabeth and also benefited from her guidance in terms of my research. When I learned about her death, I thought immediately of the way she taught Old Abram Brown by Benjamin Britten at the Dalcroze Congress in Geneva in 1981. Our introductory level class, because that was the level I was in at that Congress, and in any Congress for that matter, learned to sing the words, and then divided into groups to give shape to the four-part round that's the sort of culminating center of that wonderful piece of music for children. And we walked in files or lines inward, in lines that moved toward the center and then receded from the center, solemnly lifting and lowering our arms, and finally kneeling to make the ending. The whole space reverberated with the song's strange blend of sadness and gladness. Old Abram Brown is dead and gone. You'll never see him more. He used to wear a long brown coat that buttoned down before. Maybe some of you had the experience of doing this particular lesson with Elizabeth also. To me, it was unbelievably profound. It seemed as if I had in my memory of this piece and this experience as if I had just learned it last week. It's so vivid. She led us, but we made the music our own. It was one of the most powerful fusions of music and movement I ever experienced. Elizabeth was the first Dalcroze teacher I actually met. And this was much earlier. This was something that happened in 1966 when I was 23 and on my first research trip to Europe. Somehow I had gotten her name and an address and written to ask if we could meet. And she mobilized her whole family to come into London so that she and I could meet, which is incredible when you think about it. I was complete unknown. I wasn't going to be studying Dalcroze teaching, and I was embarking on research with very little knowledge at that point. But she had this intuition that I was serious, I think. And she gave me a roadmap to the world of Dalcroze teaching with many suggestions for locating teachers in Geneva, where I was heading on that trip, and in the United States, where I lived then and was doing graduate study at Tufts University in the Boston area, working on a
1 minute,
master's
please.
degree. 1 minute? Okay.
Roughly. Thank you.
So after that, I contacted her a few years later when I was already teaching dance history in Canada to ask for her guidance again. And she invited me to watch her teaching young professional students at the Royal College of Music and gave me more advice and addresses of colleagues to meet. So that's the way I met Natalie Tingey, who had recently compiled her wonderful book on the London School of Dalcroze Eurythmics and its graduates at home and overseas. And through Mrs. Tingey, I was led onward to Elizabeth Morton, who was British and Geneva trained in Canada, and studied with her in her teaching for adults. She had a Dalcroze class for adults at the Royal Conservatory of Music. And through her, I met Madame Lasserre, who was the originating teacher of Dalcroze work in Canada. And it was this way of Elizabeth helping me. She helped again when I came back to England later to do my graduate degree in dance studies at the University of Surrey. She introduced me to people. And she introduced me to Karen, for example, and helped me make a connection with younger, newer people who were coming along at that point. She was so generous in terms of giving time and good guidance and encouragement. I would never have been able to do what I did if I hadn't met Elizabeth van der Spar at the time I did. And I just want to end by telling you what she said at her retirement, which I was invited to go along in 1987 when she was retiring after her long teaching career. She said, "I was driven to do it because I find it so helpful. It is good. The method originated in Switzerland, but it can be considered as British as anything else." It was such a great clue that there are many Dalcroze histories and that every one of them is potentially of great interest and significance to the people who benefit.
Thank you, Selma. So grateful for your words and memories. Ruth.
Oh, you got to unmute, Ruth.
Thank you. Just prior to my going to London, I had 2 years of Eurythmics, improv and solfege at the New York Dalcroze School, mostly with Hilda Schuster. And I was very impressionable then because this was my second Eurythmics teacher after Inda Howland at Oberlin, who was very strong personality, absolutely compelling, highly opinionated, and extremely interesting. She's one of those people who changes your life. You know, my life would be different had I not had Inda Howland. And then going from her to Schuster was shocking because it was my first taste of how Eurythmics teachers can be completely different. And that was my experience between Inda Howland and Hilda Schuster. Hilda Schuster did everything her way. It was very personal. She was extremely musical, wonderful improviser, which really is what I found so compelling in her teaching. And she also was able to teach a lesson from a small kernel and open it up and open it up and open and end with a whole garden. And her lesson planning was very helpful to me in my work with children. But again, the view was narrow in certain ways, and going then to Elizabeth van der Spar's course was a whole opening of newness. And it really influenced me a lot, because my very strong belief is that in Dalcroze, it's important for us to experience different ways, different approaches, different personalities, because there are certainly many of them. Not only that, we have many cultures to deal with, and there's a richness there. And I believe that it really follows a lot of the teachings of Dalcroze, who easily could have published a manual with every kind of movement you could think of and a piece to go along with it that he'd composed, because he wrote pieces for every kind of walk and all lengths of phrasing and articulation. And he experimented a lot, and experimentation is one really important factor in his development as a teacher and a rhythmician and musician. Elizabeth, as Karin mentioned, was not a big personality. She didn't come across like Enda Howland or Hilda Schuster. What was important to me about her work was she opened up a freedom to me to make decisions about what I wanted to do. And she gave me a lot of new techniques. She gave all of us new techniques. I had never improvised, for example, a piece with only seconds or only thirds, or combinations of, fifths and thirds and sevenths and seconds and so on. It was very exciting. And I remember at the end of, I was there for 2 years with her. At the end of one of those years, now I forget what I was going to say. I'll keep going. Anyway, I have a lot to say, and I haven't gotten to, to what I wanted to say about Elizabeth, which I'll go to right away, and say with the seconds and thirds and the improv she gave us, she asked us each to create a piece for each one. In other words, we'd improvise, in which the language she used was fix a piece around an improvisation you've done. So you have a theme and you develop it. For each interval in the, could be a diatonic scale. That was very exciting. And as I think Selma mentioned, she had a particular interest in new music, and I had never done plastique before. And she had us prepare plastique. We went to Geneva one summer, our whole group, and she had us prepare a demonstration, and we had various plastiques to perform there. And one of the plastiques I did, not there, but in the course in London, was the realization of the fourth movement. I think it was Schoenberg's String Quartet number 2 in F sharp minor. It was the last movement, which was a rondo. And I was in love with this music. And I remember the excitement of putting this together as a plastique and developing that with, there were 4 of us doing it, and getting to know the music better and better, getting to know the fabric of this piece by Schoenberg. And so in this way,
Ruth, 1 minute, please.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth herself wasn't dramatic and showy, but she gave us, each of us, the opportunity to feel all that and the freedom. And she was just, I would say she was an absolutely lovely person. And her very free and lovely presentation and personality gave us a lot of room for being creative and becoming a very good working group.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you to Ava, Karin, Selma, and Ruth for sharing. If anyone else has memories or reflections to share, or maybe just even if you didn't meet Elizabeth van der Spar, what this conversation brought up for you, we'd love to hear from you. So you can just raise your hand or use the raise hand button.
Well, I'll just lead off. One of our speakers made mention of maybe Elizabeth's name wasn't as well known, or people maybe aren't as aware. I can just tell you, in the Carnegie Mellon tradition, her name was said over, and maybe not every day, but she was one of the great names that we were sort of led to believe, oh, we should hunt this out. And her handbook is still, we have probably, I don't know, I might have 15 copies of it sitting here, and we still refer to it now and again for parts. I encourage my pedagogy students, this is one of the books you might, that we look at and sort of talk through. And so just to say, I never met her, but I've known her reputation for as long as I've been in the community, and it's palatable. And so thank you to all of you for sharing, and there's there's just so much good work that, she was able to leave behind some really interesting work, which is a real tribute as well. She wasn't someone who only taught, but she did take some time to try to write some things down, from my opinion, in an era where not a lot of people were encouraged to. There was, I think there was a whole period of some of our history where some teachers were almost forbidding from writing things down, and it seems that at some of those same hours she was saying, no, here you go, I'm going to write it down for you, here's a handbook. And I think that's a really interesting feat, not for any age, but then particularly in an age when she had to have known there was somebody else across an ocean somewhere who was saying, do not write anything down. And so interesting. So
could I add something in about that handbook? One of the wonderful things in my file called van der Spar that I found were notes from a lecture she gave at a congress in Geneva in 1985, when she had just published that handbook the year before. And she gave an amazing perspective on why and what she was aiming for in that book, in that talk. One of the things that I noted and was hoping to have a chance to say is that at some point in the talk she said, music is not something in isolation. And it was an interesting comment, I felt. She really had a broad view, actually, of education and of human endeavor and of the arts. And I think she was in that particular talk trying to share some of that. She also was a very important leader in terms of doing in-service training courses and workshops across the UK, and in even the formation of the Purcell School, which I know she was very involved in. And she was broad-minded. When she kind of brought Anne Driver, for example, back into the fold of people who could help with teacher training in the UK. Anne Driver, whose work had been very controversial because of her broadcasting. And it was not condoned by Jacques Dalcroze. And it was a sort of no-no, really, that she did that. But later, as time had passed, van der Spar was really responsible, I think, for bringing her back into the picture and recognizing her greatness, which was considerable also.
Yeah, Karen.
Hi. I just wanted to say, Elizabeth did a world tour. So before Ava had come to England, I think it must have been, she did a kind of tour, and she taught everywhere. She taught at Carnegie Mellon, she taught in Canada, she taught and then in Australia. And that's how Sandra Nash got to come to London, actually, because she was picked up by Elizabeth in the world tour. So all our classes were full of people from different countries. In fact, there was hardly anybody at all from England. They were all from Israel, Japan, you know, all over the place, Denmark, where she'd sort of either because of the tour or because they got to know. So it was extremely international, sort of cosmopolitan group. A lot of the time I was the only English person there. We had people from the States everywhere. And I think she advertised more abroad than she did in England. But she was an extraordinary teacher and person, partly because she'd never been standardized by a standard education, if you see what I mean. She'd sort of found her own way, and with great support from her husband, she certainly wouldn't have been able to give the training she gave without Rufus's support, which is why she stopped when he was ill, because she said, you know, he's supported me all these years, and now it's my turn to support him. And guess who had to, well, I didn't step into the breach. I was pushed into the breach and left to work it out. But she trusted that people would grow. She trusted that people would learn and would grow. She didn't sort of feel she had to push them, except the initial, you know, impulse. She had a lot of faith in her students. And so just, well, a unique person, really.
The quick little story, the only little story I know of her being at Carnegie Mellon, which isn't, it's just a silly story, is that when she was here, my colleague, Judy Cagley, if you know Judy, who's a childhood specialist, was a young student and took Elizabeth to Kennywood, which is the local Pittsburgh amusement park where they have roller coasters and, you know, and bad amusement park food and, you know, it's for children and it's just silly. And Judy grew up in the Pittsburgh area and has a whole routine of what you do when you go to Kennywood. And you have to eat this food and then you have to eat that food and then you have to ride this ride and then you have to eat that food. And Judy has this whole like mystique about it. And she took Elizabeth van der Spar on her tour of Kennywood. And at the end of it, Elizabeth said, "Judy, my dear, you have the constitution of an ox," is what she told her, because Judy had eaten such crazy food the whole day. I'm sorry, that's the silliest story I know. So
it's very typical of her, though. She was extremely downright, sort of straightforward person, really. She said it like it was, usually.
do we have another? Either you wouldn't have to have a personal recollection. It could just, you know, anything that either to comment on something someone else has said or to share some of your own. Mari?
Yes, I have a question. So is there a handbook available to purchase? Because I have been looking for the it, and then I remember there was like a 1 or 2 books for sale at the national conference at Oberlin, and it was quickly sold out. So just my question. I wonder if I'll be able to.
Yeah, I can answer you because it was reissued several times. And if you write to, well, Dalcroze UK, there is a book secretary, and she would be able to send you a copy. It looks like this now. It has a blue cover. Looks like that.
Okay.
And there are a few copies left. If we run out, I've got one more extra one, but if we run out, we'll probably have to have it reprinted. It was translated into Italian, Spanish, French, and maybe Japanese as well. Is it not in? I don't know.
I think Yuri Ishimaru.
That's it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, I will reach out.
Yeah, just it's dalcroze.org.uk, you know, you can find it on the web, and the book secretary, she'll let you know if she's got any copies left. And if not, we'll see what we can do. Some people have more than one. I know I have one extra copy, I think.
Get the information.
Great. Thank you. Other comments, questions? Christine and then Ruth. Oh, Christine wasn't raising her hand. Okay, Ruth.
Okay. I was talking about how different Dalcroze teachers have been in my experience. And when somebody brought up the idea of note-taking and writing, that brought to mind the fact that Hilda Schuster didn't allow pencils. We couldn't bring pencils to class. She did not want us to write down because she wanted us to be absolutely present. And, writing down while she was speaking was, not being as present as she wanted us. And I'm not really making a judgment about that. I might if none of my classes allowed pencils, but going then to Elizabeth's classes right after that was so different because, of course, we could write down anything we wanted. And she recommended some reading for us. And then she had Ruth Stewart teaching us. And that was, I mean, one of the great courses I've taken in my whole life was Ruth Stewart's course. That had so much influence over everything. So that might be another subject at some point, because I know many people feel that way about Ruth's classes. But what's significant here is that Elizabeth had that as a crucial part of her program. And she and Ruth, I would say, were extremely different in just about every way I can think.
Yes.
But she wanted that for us, and I was very grateful for it.
Thank you.
She was a pioneer, actually, because she was, I think, the first of all of them to use contemporary music. That was the first thing. And we had to improvise. I had to actually play at an ISME conference, a duet with Ruth Stewart, improvising in the style of Messiaen. Well, I can tell you, my end of the improvisation wasn't necessarily fault-free, let's say. But, we were to engage with contemporary music through Ruth and through Elizabeth. And lots of people used sort of modern or 20th century pieces for their plastic. That was a very common thing. So, yeah, that was good.
Thank you. Other comments, reflections? I was really touched by I think maybe Ruth mentioned creating a piece with seconds and thirds. And I was just thinking about how these generations of Dalcroze teachers have taught their students, and then maybe you've taught me a piece about seconds and thirds, Ruth. And I think, as a flutist, I'm not as connected to the whole history of flute players and many generations because I'm not in these monthly meetings with other flutists. But in the Dalcroze community, maybe because we're so small or because we like each other and we keep coming back to these kinds of meetings and we keep being in relationship with each other. And it's really beautiful to just see this progression from teacher to student and how we're all connected. Maybe even 50 years ago, there's something that I would recognize from Elizabeth van der Spar's improv class because someone taught me. Yeah, Ruth, please.
Yeah, there was a wonderful group there, I remember. I think there were 10 people there, and it was there that I met two people, actually three, who were very much a part of my Dalcroze life since, and have been since. One of them was Sandra Nash and Aura Gorali. And Sandra was from Australia, Aura was from Israel, and Yuri Ishimaru from Japan. I've been to all those places and taught with all of them and have known them all these years. And I think that was another part of the wonderful experience of learning with Elizabeth. She had a very positive presence and you know, there was a nice flow, you know, among people. And I remember she helped Yuri, Elizabeth, very much. Yuri went to Geneva and had so much trouble with French. Then she came to London. And I remember Elizabeth said she's learning English like wildfire. And she lived with Elizabeth for, I think, 6 months. So she became more integrated into the life of the party, let's say.
And she came back to visit Elizabeth regularly.
Yes.
Throughout the rest of Elizabeth's life. Yuri would make her trip to Europe, and she would always go to visit Elizabeth in her house, which was whether it was in Barnet or later in Devon. And Elizabeth herself maintained a very strong network of friends of the people who had studied at the same time as her. They all knew each other. And she maintained strong connections with all those people.
Thank you so, so much. This has been an incredible time to remember and get to know Elizabeth van der Spar. We're going to wrap up this meeting. The next event is Dawn's short course. It starts next Wednesday, so not this week, but next week. We hope to see many of you there. And you can always reach us, virtualdalcrows@gmail.com, if you have ideas for who else we could honor in a Lessons from Our Teachers. And we hope to see you either at Dawn's short course or the next meetup later in September. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you,
you all.
Veronica.
Thank you so
so
much.
much.